Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you may be, somewhere in our lovely world. Thanks for joining us live today for the one and only Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming on the AWS Twitch channel and also YouTube AWS Events channel. So wherever you're joining us, you are more than welcome. Welcome. My name's Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate that does a bunch of serverless stuff at AWS, and super happy to be joined today, who's been on the live stream before, Erik, who's a colleague, developer advocate as well, and front-end extraordinaire and expanding his world in all things of AI. So, Erik, welcome to Serverless Office Hours again. And yeah, for people who crazily, really should know all about Erik, tell us what you do at AWS and how you've landed up doing what you do.
Hi, Julian. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on Serverless Office Hours. I have been a front-end developer for many years. Before that, I did Java development. I'm a senior developer advocate now here at AWS. Actually, a few years ago, I was doing front-end development at AWS. So it's been a fun adventure moving from there to doing developer advocate work. And what I really like to do is to teach people and show people new technologies, productivity tips, how to do things better. And I have definitely been deep diving into all things AI, as you have, and everyone else in this crazy space we're in. So thanks for having me on. Love to jump in.
Cool, excellent. Yeah, and everybody, remember we're live, so send us your questions, send us your comments. As we do before, tell us where you're coming from. It's awesome to see our global serverless community, and yeah, lovely to see where people are. Now, the title of today's stream is Vibe and Spec Coding. So we're going to go into sort of what the spec coding is, but I think at the moment, I actually want to chat about the vibe coding part, because vibe coding seems, as the term, seems to sort of taken over things. But my sort of technical definition originally was where you don't care about the code, you just write things in your prompts and off it goes and builds. But I think the sort of term has now taken over, well, more of just coding with an AI assistant. So jumping into like, what are your thoughts of, what do we even call this thing where we're not quite vibe coding, where we don't even see the code, we're interested in the code, but we're using our AI assistant? Is there even a term for it, or is that just software development in 2025?
Yeah, it's a good question. So vibe coding comes from Andrej Karpathy. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And he had this famous tweet back in earlier this year where he says he has a new kind of coding called vibe coding. And you can imagine how fast this space is moving just because of one tweet in February 2nd, 2025 now has this whole momentum behind it. But the way he describes it is, it's like you fully give in to the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget the code even exists. But the way I kind of think about it at vibe coding is you're just kind of putting prompts in, having it create your app for you, and then you're just kind of prompt engineering your way to your application to what you want. And as a developer and as someone who creates a lot of demos too, it has been very fun to jump in to this vibe coding trend that has been going around and take a look at it. There's also kind of the bad parts of vibe coding. So you may have heard of people trying to vibe code and not remembering some of those things about security or best engineering practices, and creating very sloppily written apps or pictures or whatever they're creating with AI. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind too, that it's not for everyone. It's not for everything. It doesn't replace anyone. I'd say that for sure. It's just a good companion. It's almost like having an intern next to you that can help you build, and you can prompt and ask questions and help learn and create apps with it.
Yeah. Somebody explained it the other day when I was chatting to someone, said it's sort of like pair programming with someone who never gets fed up with you and knows everything, but not in an arrogant way. I was just like, fair enough. I can go with that. So yeah, I think you brought up a good point about the sort of vibe coding. The positives of it is it's amazing for building prototypes, and even some pretty, I think in a constrained kind of way on a big code base. We do a lot of stuff on serverless land. I look after the serverless land website. I ain't a great front end engineer, and some of the awesome vibe coding that I've been able to do to add functionality is great, but I keep it constrained on various things, and I'm looking through all the code and checking everything. So yeah, today because we're talking about the sort of vibe and spec coding, that sort of second spec part of it, I think that's a sort of key to making some of this vibe coding a little bit more safer and a little bit more robust in terms of how we're doing product when you're building products and features and those kind of things. So yeah, tell us about spec coding, and yeah, the tool we're going to be talking about today is Kiro, and that's super exciting. I've been loving using that. So yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, spec-driven development, spec coding, you might hear it called, is a way to create your app in a more straightforward way. Instead of vibe coding, where you're kind of going back and forth with your code editor, your AI agent, AI IDE, you are more creating a formalized process. And it's really good for creating complex features, for creating things that have a little bit more depth to them and that need a lot of forethought. So it's spec is really good for, and this is directly from the definition that we have on kiro.dev, which I'll talk about in a moment, but it's good at like taking high level ideas and creating detailed requirements, specifications, and a task list. So it's really good at, in this case with Kiro, which is our new AI IDE. It's come out in the last few months, and I could talk more about how that process came out. You can have a feature that's a little bit more in depth. You can ask Kiro to create this feature, and it will then create a detailed design document of first it creates a specification document, and then it'll create a design document, and then it'll create a requirements document. So it'll walk you step by step on how to create this feature. It'll infer from your prompt on what you want, and then you can go back and forth with it to make sure that it's creating this feature or app the way that you like it to be. So it has it's really for more in-depth, more projects and features that need more thought to it, and you want to make sure that it gets it right.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to be honest, the funny thing is the vibe coding thing, you would never sit down at your laptop or whatever and just fully write a whole program and then push it out into production. It's an iterative process. You'd even on a whiteboard or a napkin or in your notepad, you would say, oh, what's the spec? What are the requirements of this? What are my limitations? What tech do I want to use? What external things do I want to use? All these kind of things. So that one-shot prompt that builds you an amazing app is sort of can be awesome, but the reality is today is you've got rules, you've got stuff that needs to happen in your production app, and you want to ensure there are tests or ensure there's linting, or you're going to use this framework or that framework, or particular languages or particular. So it's the rules of your coding, and that could be the rules of your company or your university or just your personal style. So yeah, this is a great way to codify that and then get your AI assistant to say, not to be a pain, but follow the rules, but at least be guided. And what I like about it is this iterative approach that before it starts coding, and you check all the requirements and go, oh, I didn't think of that. Well, let's add something or remove something, or oh, I think I need to explain that a bit more. Go through all the process, and then, yeah, hopefully you're going to get. Isn't the point that you're going to get a better app out the end of it?
Yeah, it really does. So, and you have to get that point of going back and forth. I think it's worth repeating, because if you use specs, you really need to put some thought into it. So you might start with that one-shot prompt that will create maybe up to a whole app, but you really need to pay close attention to the files that it creates so you can guide it the correct way. And starting with those specifications or requirements documents, it kind of has this user acceptance type criteria to it, and then really craft that to what you expect the user to see in your app. And then when it gets to design, check the design that it created. Sometimes it'll create mermaid documents, which is like a way to, in Markdown, to create a diagram. Then you'd want to go and check that diagram and then iterate. And there's this refined process. And then finally it comes up with a task list. So yeah, every part of the process, you'll need to kind of go through, make sure it makes sense. But then it can be very powerful when it creates the output, because it should be what you expect.
Cool. So yeah, how best do we want to show? Do you want to explain Kiro first, or do you want to dive into showing us what the spec files are? I am learning at the feet of the master. So.
Yeah, let me you can bring up my screen. I have a blog post, so I've kind of distilled down a lot of the ideas of what Kiro is and how to use it in this blog post. So if you don't know, we've been kind of talking about Kiro, but if you have not heard of it yet, it's a AI IDE created by from us at AWS. It's really not. It's not AWS Kiro. It is just Kiro. So we really want all aspects of people to use it for any of their AI IDE problems that they're having. So it works great with any sort of language out there. It uses Claude 3.7 and Claude 4 in the background. And we had released it, gosh, I don't know, it's been a month and a half, but we had such a outpouring of support. We thought we would only have a certain amount of downloads, and we exceeded those download goals in hours. And we had to put up a wait list because so many people had tried it. And we had, I've never seen so many YouTube videos on a product that we've created. So lots and lots of YouTube videos were created and people are trying it out. And so it's been amazing reception for it. So right now it's still in the wait list, but we are working very diligently to start getting people off that wait list to try it out. We've gotten a lot of feedback. It's still in developer preview, meaning that we're still gathering feedback. We're still making changes. Hopefully it'll be out of developer preview soon. I don't know exactly when, but we're still making changes and updates to it. And we're just trying to make it as good as it can be.
Cool. So yeah, for people who may have used Amazon Q Developer, either via the CLI or via some other kind of tools, how should people think about Kiro, as a comparison?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have Amazon Q, and Amazon Q has almost like a suite of different tools with it. Kind of the most common one is the extension. So Amazon Q IDE that works with VS Code. It also works with IntelliJ and several other code editors out there. And that is great for its use cases. They have a bunch of features for it. There's even some business features for it. There's also a Amazon Q CLI, which is a command line. That's my favorite out of the Amazon Q products. It's really slick. It works in the command line. You can talk to it. In fact, I was just talking to Candace, a solutions architect that I've worked with, and she said a common pattern she does is she uses Kiro, and then she'll open up QCLI for more specific questions. So she'll run both at the same time. So that's more of a command line. Kiro, though, is a full editor. So it's based on the foundation of VS Code. So it's using VS Code, and we're updating. Once a new version of VS Code comes out, we are updating that. So it's fully integrated into your IDE. So it's not like you're just downloading an extension or anything. And that gives us some powerful features like the spec-driven development part. While on the other hand, with Q and QCLI and QIDE, you could sort of mimic that behavior if you just put in the right prompts, but it's not as integrated. It's not as slick. So that's definitely one of the reasons you may want to try out Kiro. But we're kind of open to everyone. So if you don't like, if you have your VS Code and it has a very specific settings and you don't want to change editors, even though we are based on VS Code, you can continue using that, continue using Q IDE or QCLI, that's fine. But we found that people really love VS Code. I'm a huge VS Code fan. I've been using it for years, and having like a tightly integrated in intelligent agent that can help you write code is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about it. What do you think?
Yeah, and also just to reiterate on the VS Code thing, I mean, one of the cool things with everybody using VS Code is a lot of these AI code editors are using the open source VSS code. And so it means a whole bunch of the extensions and the settings you have sort of just work. Maybe there's some which don't, but I haven't had an issue with any extensions that don't work. And so you can install Kiro and say, just import my VS Code settings, and it sort of does it. And so you've basically got a super enhanced VS Code without you having to lose all your settings or your configuration. So yeah, that's why I've seen it. And I've tried a bunch of these code editors, and it's just awesome to see when they come up and Kiro comes up and says import your settings. You off you go, and you've then got, all the stuff you've had set up in VS Code, but with all the AI goodness as well.
That's a good point. Yep. So since we are using our foundation VS Code and a fork in some ways, that it doesn't have the same registry as Visual Studio Code. That's a good call out. We do use VSX, so most extensions will work. You may find one or two that don't. Maybe they haven't, it's not in the open registry, but for the most part, they do. So that's a good segue. So we can talk about some of the features of Kiro and why you may want to use it. There's really, we've talking about spec, and I think spec is probably the number one feature that we really want people to try out. And we really feel like this differentiates ourselves from some of the other editors out there. But it's not just one feature. Of course, it's all the features together make it good. So we have something called agent hooks, which I don't think I did much in this blog post, but we have some agent hooks, which are these agents that listen in the background. You can have it triggered either like on a file save, you can manually trigger them, you can have different scenarios. So a good example of like agent hooks would be like anytime you save a component, you could have it write a unit test, or every time you save a function, it can write a unit test for you automatically in the background. Then we have something called MCP. Of course, I'm sure this has been talked about a lot, Model Context Protocol. We obviously support that out of the box. Right as of today, for those a little bit more into the weeds, we only support standard I/O. But I do have some ways of getting around that. So if you have an MCP server somewhere that's using streamable HTTP or SSE, you can still use it. I have a tip for doing that. And then we have this thing called steering files. So these are ways of like adding rules, and you can kind of do some fun patterns with this where you're adding rules to Kiro, and then you can have it read those rules and have it connect to like MCP server. So something I put here inside this tips list is you can have your steering files connected to the MCP server. So anytime someone, let's say, goes in and updates or ask a question about documentation, in this case, we have this fake math JSON DSL repository. And I'm going to give a shout out to Brian Beach. He's a solution architect. He created this. He also has a blog post coming out soon on this exact topic. So hopefully I'll update this blog as soon as he has it out. But you can do things like this. You can have it automatically connect to an MCP server anytime it sees you talking about the math JSON library in the agentic chat window. So there's a lot of interesting patterns you can do there. Were you going to say something, Julian?
No, yeah, all good. I love the connection between the steering files and MCP. You sort of get to connect to the other world, but using your steering files to give it instructions, but then connect to the rest of the world for extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the agent hooks. I know you were talking about briefly about the agent hooks. So you mentioned something about writing unit tests. But I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff in there that you can do. It's even in fact something I need to take a closer look at, because some people are mentioning you can write an automatic linting or even security scans on dependencies and basically anything at a save file. It is sort of an event-driven kind of thing. If people are in the event-driven architecture serverless world or the event-driven node world, I think it's a sort of similar kind of concept that you save something and it kicks off a bunch of events to do run these agents in the background to do whatever stuff you wanted to do. And I think that can get pretty sophisticated and pretty helpful.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting use cases for the agent hooks. You had already touched on some of them, like having security scans done on like file saves. Another one is maybe creating documentation automatically when you save certain files or do certain actions. I just did a demo earlier today, in fact, where we were using the AWS diagram MCP server. Let me see here. We have so many MCP servers now, but there's one that helps you create diagrams.
Oh, wow.
And what we did is we had it run manually, and it had an older diagram that was created a few weeks ago, and then we manually ran it, and then it updated the diagram using the MCP server and generated it. So there's some really nice things you can do in that aspect. I think it's here somewhere. Let me see. diagram. I'll have to find it, but there's so many different ones in this list. So there's things like that. I've used it mostly when I'm doing my work is just creating documentation or unit tests, but there, you can be very creative when using agents.
Yeah. I'm just going to grab that URL and stick it up because it is, there's so many MCP servers.
I'm just trying to find, where is it? It might be under developer tools and support. Here it is, AWS diagram MCP server. Here's the one I was talking about.
Ah, cool. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it uses the correct icons that you would expect. It's pretty powerful once you get into it. The two that I like the most are the ones I put in my 8 tips blog post. Is the MCP servers for the 2 AWS ones are the AWS documentation server and the AWS Cloud Control API MCP. If you haven't used the AWS documentation server, it's really neat because one thing I know as a developer, I love looking at docs. I don't love looking at the crazy thousands of docs that AWS has and trying to find answers, or worse yet, when you're looking at like the actual SDK outputs and they have no examples.
Yeah.
But I love using the documentation server because I can just put in English exactly what I'm looking for and it'll pop up.
Yeah, and especially when there are things across services, or you want to, check quickly check a limit or something like that. Yeah, I found it super useful. Just you've got a quick question about something, and of course you could search the documentation. In fact, this is searching the documentation, but it's just that more quicker and more obvious.
Let me share Kiro, and we can kind of take a look at how it works. So let me see. This works. Okay, so I think I'm sharing. All right. So cool. Here is Kiro, and this is what it looks like. So it might be easier to kind of visualize. On the left-hand side here, I have just looks like VS Code here. I have my folder structure, but I have this new ghost icon here on the left-hand side. And if I click on it, I have my specs, agent hooks, steering, and then MCP servers. Now I already set up a few beforehand. One is this movie example. So I was using Agent Core a couple days ago, and I wanted to see if I could create an MCP server that connected to my local theater website and then listed all the times of the movies. And so I was using Beautiful Soup and kind of scraping the data because they didn't have an API, but it actually worked pretty good just being able to do it through here. I'll show you, maybe later I'll show a little bit of that code. But the two that I really like is this AWS documentation MCP server and API MCP server. And you can even combine these two when you're using it. So let me just show an example of how you would use the API MCP server. So I can right here, I can just ask before I do that, I just want to give one configuration I set here. I put read operations only on this. And that means that it's not going to be able to do any mutations. It's not going to be able to make changes to my infrastructure. So I just wanted to be able to read data and then output it. Now, locally on my system, I already have all my credentials set up. So this should work. I think oops, let me present again.
That security bit is actually super cool because it's actually so simple. It's just a config option. And there's also an AWS Serverless MCP server, which we covered as well. And that's also got the same thing. It's got two settings, allow write operations and also allow access to sensitive data, which allows basically streaming down the logs. So yeah, you can just have that little bit of control about, what your crazy MCP tools can do on your behalf. So you're like, hang on. I just want to explore this first without it going off and, doing crazy stuff in my account.
That's what I love. I don't like things changing on me. So I just said, call the MCP tool. Now you can see here, this is just a bunch of random buckets that I created in the past. I did a lot of demos in Amplify, but you can see I did have some Bedrock and infrastructure buckets too, Trail, and then some test buckets that I created. So this is really nice. I can go in here, just ask human, just in plain English, what I want. It's going to go in and find the data. It's going to run the CLI commands for me using the MCP server. And I also don't have to worry about it, breaking anything. Another kind of thing I like to do too is with these with these steering files. So before I start any sort of app, I usually click this generate steering docs button, and this will analyze the application that I'm in, and then it'll create some steering docs. And these are going to be like rule files. It's going to summarize my app, so that way when I use this in the future, when I start asking it questions, it'll have that inside the context. And it just makes Kiro smarter and make better decisions for me. One thing also, kind of, I alluded this before, is I like to also kind of create my own rules files, not just have the ones generated by Kiro. So I might create one called, I don't know, NCP rules, or maybe we'll call it general rules. And then this will create a markdown file for me. And then inside here, I can put some of my rules that I might have. So like in this one, I'll say anytime I look at documentation, use the context 7 MCP server. And then also put in something like never make changes without asking me first. Always ask before editing files. So one thing I noticed in Kiro is it's like an eager intern. It wants to always change things. I'll be asked, can you explain this concept? And then sometimes it'll be like, oh, can I actually make these changes? So sometimes I put these rules in to just define it and be more clear about exactly how I want Kiro to work. So if I save this and then I come back here, I'm just going to open up a new one and I'll be like, tell me how to add Tailwind CSS4 to a Vite application. So now it's going to look at the general rules file that I just created. And it says, oh, I should use context 7. So it's going to automatically use this MCP server. And I didn't even have to tell it to use it. Otherwise, it would have probably just looked in. So you have down here Claude Sonnet 4. It probably would have just looked in Claude Sonnet 4 and it would have not worked, right? Because Claude Sonnet 4 may not know about Tailwind CSS4, which is the latest version of this CSS utility library. So I always like to do these things like this just to make sure it gets the latest. And you can see here, it's installing Vite at latest. It's a plugin. This looks right. So you can imagine just creating this rules file is really important to be able to use Kiro effectively.
Yeah, and I've just put a link to, it's not quite for Kiro, it's more for Amazon QCLI, but prompts.dev is actually a really cool website, which is the prompts, rules, and agents for Amazon Q Developer. And you can actually get a great idea of, the different kind of prompts you can do. And I mean, these are things of, documentation it can be, or testing, where I'm just going to pull up the site for testing. Something went wrong. Let me, so a lot of requirements kind of thing. So you can just do in the requirements of, whenever I'm running a Python application, do this. This is my, this is my camel case for this or whatever. This is how to name my variables. This is how to handle whatever. No Java or that can, Node for Java, you can use Maven or Gradle. That can be a requirement. So you can code all of these, write them in the Markdown files. And the cool thing is they're also shareable between projects, shareable between your teammates or within your company. So in a way, it's actually quite a good practice that, if someone joins your company, they're not like, okay, it's some wiki somewhere which tells our coding standards, but that's always a little bit funky, or whether that's up to date. Now you can actually codify your coding standards in these Markdown docs, which is super helpful.
I love that. And I've seen people too use these rule files. You can check them into your version control system and then share them with everybody in your team. I've seen maybe this prompts.dev, I haven't seen that website and all the different things that it does, but kind of a pattern I'm seeing too lately is people have been creating profiles. Now, Kiro doesn't support profiles by default. Maybe in the future it will, but maybe you want a profile for a front-end developer, a back-end developer, an AWS developer. Yeah. So you can create a rules file that kind of specifies how a person like a front-end developer would act, like what plugins they should be, what libraries they should use, how they should do indentation. Should they use TypeScript or not TypeScript? Or maybe if you're backend, like what is your preferred language? Maybe it's Python. So that way you can kind of cater it, and then you would add this into the context when you're using it. You can actually add context in pretty easily. Let me present again. I have a little bug on my system where sometimes I have to
Reshare.
share,
You can see
reshare.
this isn't an edited, slick live stream. We are dealing with the gremlins as we do.
What was I saying? No.
Good question. I interrupted you. We were talking about the prompt and the prompt files and sharing them. Was there something more specific?
Well, I'll just say,
paying attention, send us in the comments, and we'll get back on track.
I will say when you're using the steering files, there's this refine button too, which is really nice, and then you can use it to look through what you've created, and it will like refine it into like a more general output to it. So I'll show you in a second. And then once you do that, so here it is. It created this nice markdown file. It's basically saying the same thing I did before, but it's a lot more explicit. Has even some code quality standards that it assumes that I want. And then it has this YAML part at the top. And this is really nice too. Now I know what I was thinking about before. You can tell what rules files, when it should be included and when it shouldn't be included. So you can put in all sorts of things in here that say like maybe only have this supported for files that are .tsx or something like that. Okay. So that way it doesn't always run for every single file. Oops, let's save that. And then inside so right now this is always going to be doing it, but let's say, imagine that you had another file here in your file system that you wanted to include inside your session. And when you're asking, so you can hit this pound, and then you can actually just put in the name, exactly what you want inside here. So if you just want to include a separate file that will be added into the context when you ask a question, then you can do that manually. In this case, general rules will always be included in the steering files, but if I didn't have it always included, I can just manually add it into the agent chat down here. Now, we've kind of gone over a little bit of the basics of how to get this started, but one thing I was trying to do the other day was learn more about Agent Core. So, Julian, you said you guys have been talking a little bit about Agent Core.
Yeah, just a little bit. We mentioned it as a sort of Agent Core is a whole bunch of primitives as part of Amazon Bedrock, and this is a way to build agents in the cloud, but we take over a whole bunch of functionality. And I know it's got a runtime, which is a secure, isolated runtime to run code. It's got some memory so you can keep state. I know it's got a gateway, which you can use to build MCP servers, and there is a fourth one, and I'm blanking on that, but yeah, we would love to actually chat more about Agent Core, because I think, although it's in beta and preview at the moment, I think it's going to be a super exciting thing for building agents in the future.
Yeah, it's in preview. It's really neat, but I wanted to learn more about it. So I kind of wanted to create a Python app and just like deploy it. So I kind of started, you might see here, I have like a hidden VNV file. So I'm going to delete that. And then, oh, it's a directory. So let's do rmrf. And I don't have anything else here. And then I'm going to do UV. I think it's a knit. I'm not great at these UV commands. Okay, so created something called main.py. I'll do UV run main.py. And don't worry about this. It's just giving me an old directory. I set up the virtual environment later, but it says hello from Agent Core CLI demo. So we have just a basic hello world Python file here, which we can see here in this main py. That's all it's doing. But I want to see if I can create maybe either an MCP agent or MCP server or an agent to deploy. So the way I was trying to learn through here is I was just going to use, I was going to try to vibe code it. Now I could use spec, and that's where it's really more in depth, but just kind of just fun playing around with. I was going to try vibe. So let me ask it a question. Can you tell me how to get started with Agent Core runtime, use the AWS MCP server? So now I'm going to explicitly tell it to use the AWS MCP server because it might use context 7. I don't want it to use that because I put that in the general rules file. So it's also looking at just the basic app. And so this is really helpful. Now I could go in and Google this and find the exact documentation, but it's nice that I can just grab it directly inside here, and I can even have it like basically create the app for me. Now it's had problems opening up one of my files. Let's see. Oh, so now see, it's very explicit. It's trying to update and add some more additional files for me. So let me stop it here. It's very eager sometimes to create things. So let me open it back up. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to say, please, and I'll share my screen again. And it also might be to do because I allowed a lot of my MCP commands to be ran. So
but
please,
also just showing that how it's, you know, connecting to the documentation and getting the info, because, you know, Kira is super new and Agent Core is what, a month or two old. So I mean, you know, many LLMs wouldn't even have heard of Agent Core. So the fact that this can connect to up-to-date information from AWS, if something is added to Agent Core, you know, today, that's available by this tool. So, you know, your LLM isn't stuck in the past.
Exactly. Yes. And so it has the latest and greatest. And if you looked at many other places, probably wouldn't have it. Okay. So now it's going to search the documentation. I was very explicit this time. Don't make any changes. Because I think it thought through the prompt that I wanted it to go ahead and do everything for me. So I'm going to trust this, or I'm just going to run it. If you trust the commands, it's not going to ask you next time. And I always try to make sure that I don't trust commands that are making changes, because then it just makes changes and I don't know what's happening. This read documentation, I could probably just trust this because it's not really making any changes. I'll just auto approve this. It's just reading documentation. All right, so now it's giving me pretty detailed instructions on like how I can modify this from my Hello Agent Core. Here's our use AI agent function, how to do local testing, deploy using the starter kit, which is essentially the starter kit for Agent Core, helps do a lot of the heavy lifting of the infrastructure part for you. It will containerize your app. It will help you deploy it. It will create the ECS and Fargate and everything in the back end that you need kind of for you. So you don't have to do that. Now you can manually with CDK or SAM or CloudFormation and create everything yourself, but it's nice to have like a tool that does that for you.
Yeah.
So then it kind of gives you a little bit of idea of like, here, this is how you would start. So like I could just try it now. Now, I don't know if this will work firsthand because I'm just playing around with it, but yeah, so creates an agent core, imports agent, and then just says, hello, how can I help you today? And then you have local testing, of course. So if I do uv run main.py, so now it says I need to install some dependencies. So there's the Bedrock Agent Core dependency that I'll need to install, which I think I've done before. Yeah, I think it's Bedrock _ Agent Core. And then let's see here. If I UV run it, oh, it says you need strands tool, because I'm using strands. And the strands one, I always forget the name of these. You probably know it off the top of your head. Strands, UV pip install. Done it before. Playwright, strands agent tools. That's it. Okay, so to install that, I could also freeze it and put it in the requirements document. All right, let's see if it runs. Oh, so it's still not letting me run it. Maybe. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's activate it because I'm not very good at UV, but now I'm in the right environment. Maybe still not wanting to do strands tools. UV pip. Let's see, strands agent tool, strands agent builder. Let's try to install it this way. I think you have to UV add. I think that's what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, I'm also racking my brain for the actual UV specific commands rather than just, install.
Okay, we're getting a little closer.
I like UV. It does make things much easier. It's just that sort of brain switch of
Yes.
seeing what you need to do.
Still won't do it. So I don't know why, but it's still, because Strands Tool is not in the package registry and program depends on Strands Tool. So I'm not sure why.
Is it actually Strands Tools, or is it just...
Let me see. I can also do inline editing.
Strands-agents-tools. That's what a quick search did for me.
Strands-agents-tools. That's strands-agents-tools. No solution. Yeah, let's try this. Audit one. So it says it's already installed. UV. Let's do pip install. Wonder if I could. I think it should be installed. I'm not sure why it's not running. Let's do this. UV Python. Oops. Main.py. Okay. I'll share my screen in a second, but you get the idea. You could try to run it locally and then test it. But I think, let me switch over to a app that's a little farther along. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. So here is an app that's a little farther along. And this has a steering file with all the steering files. I have this agent py. And so this is what I had deployed to Agent Core. And what it's saying here is I'm using Strands models. I'm using the agent tools from Strands. I'm using the Bedrock Agent Core. And then I'm creating a new Agent Core app. I'm using the Anthropic Sonnet 4 model, which, by the way, I have to put US the top dot because the inference, the way it works with multi-region. And then I have this client session where I'm using this beautiful soup, which is a way to essentially scrape a website. So this is like my local theater. I'm grabbing the data out of it, and it's just returning the HTML. And then the agent itself is then parsing it and then basically sending back the information and show times to it. So let's see if I can run this locally. Let's see here. Let me make sure I'm in the right folder. Okay. Agent.py. Okay, so let me, of course, now I have problems with course and fast API. It never ends, but let me think here of what I want to do. Let's do
dependency hell on getting all those things working.
Yeah.
But I feel lucky that we're in talking about the Python ecosystem and not NPM, which was had its hacking thing this week. So the power of all these dependencies on the web is amazing, but yeah, making sure it all behaves is another thing.
Yes. And course middleware, I don't remember the name of this. I guess it's part of Fast API. I wonder if that would work. I haven't tried this out since I added those packages. Okay. So now it's running the agent. And to test the agent, we would have to curl localhost because it's running on localhost. So let me check. I think I've run it before. Okay, localhost. I think it's port 8080. Okay, so here's a invocation to port 8080 for invocation. I don't know if you can see this. And we're going to do what movie are you currently playing? So let's see if it works. So this is how you test it locally.
So this is just an agent that's running locally, running a Fast API web server internally. You then curling to that local host into that web server, and that is then going to be running basically your Python script to be able to pull movie stuff.
Yep. So here it is. So it returned back. I was just looking at this other window. So yep, this is all the data that it returned. So it returns it into this JSON object here. So we could, I don't know, we could copy that into a file. I also like JQ, so you can kind of take a look at it in there in like a little nicer format.
Yep.
That helps you format JSON on the command line. Also could have just copy and pasted it into a file. But yeah, so it seems like it's working. And to deploy it using well, that's working. To deploy this, I could, with Agent Core, you can use the tools that I showed earlier to run Agent Core in the command line and then deploy it. Now, one tricky thing is with the setup of this is it has Cognito is protecting it. So you have to pass in an authorization bearer token to be able to talk to the deployed site. Just FYI. Yeah. So here it is with all my show times and just this big JSON blob. So I can definitely like, and this is one thing I was doing the whole time was just asking it questions like, why, like what is the URL for Agent Core? And then it would like kind of grab all the information for me and figure out what it is, which was really important. And here it is. I won't show it, but I'll probably delete this afterwards. Let me see. I kind of want to get this working and figure out what I'm doing wrong here. This is kind of bothering me, but do you have any questions while, and then we got like 15 more minutes or 12?
No, we good. 15. We haven't quite, we did have some questions earlier in the chat. We have got Eerie Edits, who's been joining us again. Thanks for joining us from Twitch via LA. And yeah, Schizophrenic Web Developers asking, is Erik still hosting the AWS Amplify series here on this channel?
So we did have something called the Front End and Mobile Dev Hour. I was hosting that. That was our Amplify front end show for a while. Unfortunately, we did end that show at the beginning of this year, end of last year. We kind of took a bunch of different shows, like the Serverless Office Hours, and we kept those, and we kind of moved other shows away. But if you had been on this morning, we have a new Kiro show, which is this really cool weekly show where we just do demos of Kiro. We talk about best practices and tips. And so we're rotating hosts on that. The last few weeks, Darko has been hosting it. This week, I hosted it. So this morning, me and Candice hosted it, which was really fun. We answered a bunch of questions. So if you are looking to learn more about Kiro, jump into that show. It's on the kiro.dev Twitch channel. We're also streaming it on LinkedIn, X, and a few other places. So I'm really excited about that. And Amplify actually did come up today during that live stream. Some people asked us, there is a front end MCP server, AWS front end MCP server. And by default, it uses Amplify for its authentication, which is really awesome.
Awesome, yeah. And yeah, just Manavdodia22, which IDE is that? That's exactly what you're talking about. This is Kiro, which is you can find on kiro.dev. And this is what Erik is showing exactly today. It is an AI coding assistant, which has some special powers. One of them is being able to run a whole bunch of agents. And then also, as the title of the stream says, the spec coding, where Erik is basically setting up some specification files, and it's a far more robust way of being able to write applications, and it's all built into Kiro from kiro.dev. And so, yeah, this is what we're chatting about today.
Okay, so I was trying to troubleshoot why this keeps giving this error, and it says, the issue is that Trans tools isn't available in the public PI registry. The issue that you have Strands and Strands tools listed separately, but according to AWS docs, you should use Strands agents instead. Also, Strands tools doesn't appear in public repo. So I wonder if this was, let's see, let's try this out. So we're using Kiro now. So, okay, so it has Strands and Strands tools, but maybe it should be Strands agents. Is it called Strands agents though? It's not. I wonder.
Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell, but I could be wrong.
Oh, no, it got far this time. Now it's complaining that my other app is
running.
Let me let me see here. Where is the other app? So I'm going to stop this other app. Stop this other one. And then bring up this one. Okay, so it was something about where this PyProject TOML file had the wrong information. You know, I think it is when it started creating everything for Agent Core, it wanted to try to create it started updating the TOML file.
Yeah, for Agent Core rather than the actual strands part.
That's probably what happened.
So actually, we haven't really covered what strands is, because strands is an SDK. Do you want to just quickly explain what strands is if people are going, what's the difference between strands and Agent Core?
Yeah, so strands is our homegrown SDK to help you build agents and MCP clients, and it connects not just to Amazon Bedrock, but it connects to a whole bunch of different large language model providers. You can hook it up to OpenAI, Ollama, anything else like that. So it really helps you build agents. So that's kind of the main purpose.
Yeah, and although it's out there from AWS, you don't have to use it with AWS. It also plugs into a whole bunch of other frameworks and a whole bunch of other kind of things. So people I've been speaking to have been super happy with strands. They say it makes life so much easier for building these kind of agents. So yeah, give it a go.
Oops. So Agent Core is running right now. So now I can just run it locally as well, like I did before. Now Agent Core will help orchestrate all your agents and deploy them into the cloud for you. It also has some really nice features like memory features that can help save like your history, your history of what you're doing. It also has ways of taking existing RESTful API endpoints and converting them into MCP servers. It has a whole bunch of really nice tools to help you deploy and orchestrate your agentic flow. Okay, yeah, so now it came back. I still don't have access to current movie listings. I mentioned my previous notes, but so now I just asked a question like what movies are currently playing. And obviously it doesn't know that because this is all it does is how can I help you today? But this is just using, I think by default it uses Claude 4. So I think it's just using Claude 4 and returning this information for us. Because you can set in the agent with strands. There's a bunch of options here to set like what large language model you want to use and what you want to do with it. Let me share my screen again.
I'm sharing again.
Yeah.
Gremlins are bugging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just about the VS Code things. Thanks, schizophrenic developer, replying. That's what I love when you do live streaming and two people watching, answer each other's questions. And also, Just Helix says it really does look like VS Code. I was thinking the same. That is entirely deliberate because it is actually a derivative of VS Code, as a lot of other AI coding assistants are. So it is using the open source version of Code OSS. That seems to ring a bell in my brain. But yeah, so that's a benefit. It isn't a huge big lift and shift to move from VS Code or something like that to these new coding editors. Specifically, we're talking about Kiro today. You can import, a lot of all your existing settings and your extensions and all those kind of things. So yeah, as Just Helixia says again, I think almost all IDs look the same. Well, sort of if they are VS Code based. There's obviously, JetBrains is a whole other family of IDs as well. But yeah, there are many VS Code clones at the moment out there. So it does also make it easier to try different ones when you can put in your different settings and extensions.
Yes, that was quite deliberate because how much people love VS Code. I was going to show real quick with strands, you can choose the model, the tool, system prompt. So if you don't specify any of those, it still works like we did here. But it has some same defaults for you.
Okay. So you're running this agent locally as you would sort of a local MCP server, using strands as the SDK to be able to generate all the code in the agent to do whatever you need to do. So the next step is if you did want to then deploy this to Agent Core, you could use the Agent Core runtime. And so you would basically take this agent, which is already using strands, wrap that up, use the CLI or whatever kind of commands to just push this up to then run in the cloud. And so then you could connect your, your local server to an agent running in the cloud. rather than having to maintain and distribute all this code locally.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's a good succinct way. And by the way, here's the command. You can install it with pip bedrock agent core starter toolkit, and you can run agent core configure -e and then the file name, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions like your execution role, and you can have it automatically create it, and ECR repository, and then requirements text file. You definitely have to have the requirements text file, even if you're using UV. You have to make sure you like freeze it and put all the information in there, and then authorization. Now you can either use OAuth. So if I put no, I don't want OAuth, it'll use IAM as instead. So it doesn't let you like deploy it without any sort of authentication. Yeah, you have to have something inside,
which is a good thing.
Exactly. And then it creates this Bedrock Agent Core YAML file. It creates the Docker files and everything for you. And you kind of take a look at them. So it creates this Docker file. And also it always adds this AWS Open Telemetry to your distro, which is really nice. And this is a way that you can kind of track your, after it deploys your Docker container to ECS, you can then provide details of how it's running, some observability things that you may want to look at. And there's a whole new, if you look in CloudWatch, there's a whole new console for Agent Bedrock, Agent Core runtime. So you can look at even more traces of information. I'm not going to deploy it because it's going to take a while, but you can then, I think it's Agent Core launch, and then this will launch it directly and then give back a URL that you can use to invoke it.
Okay, so you basically used an MCP server to grab a bunch of information. Okay, we had some hassles deploying dependencies. That's quite normal, I think, for every kind of thing. We got around that as well. And then that was just an agent running locally. You used Strands as the SDK, and there was very, very little other boilerplate stuff you needed to put in there. Of course, if you want to add more tools and more functionality, sure, you would add that, connecting to your private databases or public databases or whatever for your private information. And then you've been using this Agent Core utility. It was the... So what was the utility name?
It's the Bedrock Agent Core Starter Toolkit.
Starter Toolkit, of course. So you're using the Starter Toolkit, which just looks at your existing requirements.txt, looks at your existing main.py, builds a Docker file, wraps it all around, and then gives some installation instructions and an installation tool to be able to then, push that Docker file up to Agent Core. And, I presume that would then come back with a URL, which is that available by, and then you've got an agent running in the cloud.
Exactly. And then you can invoke it. You would have to, if it has IAM credentials, you have to do that IAM SIG v4. Or if it's OAuth, you'd have to send the authorization bearer token over, but then you can start talking to it back and forth. It's pretty powerful. It didn't take me too long to get it up and running just using that starter toolkit. It was really simple. And using Kiro, just asking questions back and forth using the AWS MCP server.
Cool, excellent. Well, Erik, thanks so much for showing us a bit of Kiro today. We also went on a lovely little tangent to other roads to look at Agent Core as well. So using a real world use case to learn something. Kiro is exciting. The only trouble at the moment is there is a bit of a wait list because it went basically gangbusters and so many people wanted to use it, which is a good thing. And we work for AWS, so you don't have to believe just what we say, but go and read out on the internet what some other independent people say about Kiro, and they're also enjoying it, which is super heartening to hear. Erik and I both use it regularly, and so it's a really cool AI tool. And when you plug it in with all the MCP servers, it knows even more about AWS and makes life much more simple. So Erik, thanks so much. Thanks so much for Jeffrey, producer behind the scenes, who puts this all together. And we'll be back same time, same place next week. We've actually got a brand new launch of stuff that I can't tell you about because it hasn't launched yet, but it's going to be exciting. So please join us same time next week. Erik, thanks for putting this all together, and we'll see you on the live streams again soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.